I'm Diane Mercer. I teach high school English in Asheville, North Carolina. My husband Harold works in insurance. Our daughter Natalie just turned 16. Honor roll, first chair violin, volunteers at the church food bank every other Saturday. She's the kind of kid other parents point to and say, "Why can't you be more like her?" 2 years ago, we bought a small cabin property outside town. 12 acres, a barn, split rail fencing, a place to breathe. Harold thought it would be good for Natalie, get her away from the pressure of AP classes and college applications. So we got her a horse, Jasper, a sweet-tempered quarter horse with a white star on his forehead. She loved him, or at least, that's what I thought. 3 weeks ago, Harold installed security cameras around the property. He didn't tell me, didn't tell Natalie. He was worried about break-ins in the area, and he's always been the cautious type. He mounted one at the barn entrance, one at the cabin door, and one, the one that changed everything, inside the barn itself. Last Tuesday night, he called me into his office. His hands were shaking. His face was white as paper. "Diane," he whispered, "you need to see this." On his laptop screen, our daughter, alone in the barn, holding a riding crop. I watched as Natalie brought it down on Jasper's hindquarters. Once, twice, 3 times, hard. The horse flinched, tried to turn away. She didn't stop. She hit him again, and again. And then she stepped back, stared at him, and smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not a guilty smile. A satisfied smile. Harold had weeks of footage, days and days of our perfect daughter, alone in that barn, tormenting an animal that trusted her, screaming at him, kicking the stall door, standing utterly still with that cold, empty expression I'd never seen before. "Our daughter is a monster," Harold said. "We need to leave. We need to sell this place and get out." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to defend her, to find some explanation that made sense. But I couldn't, because I'd seen it too. The cruelty, the pleasure. We confronted her the next morning. She cried, she apologized. She said she was stressed, that she didn't mean it, that she loved Jasper and would never hurt him on purpose. But her excuses didn't match the timestamps, didn't match the patterns, didn't match the look on her face in those videos. We took her to a psychologist. Dr. Calloway said it was teenage adjustment issues. He recommended family therapy and told us not to catastrophize, but he didn't see what we saw. So I started digging, and I found things. A neighbor's cat that went missing when Natalie was 12. A classmate's science project, live tadpoles, that mysteriously died under her supervision. Moments I'd explained away as coincidence. And then I found her journal, hidden under her bed. Pages of sketches, animals, people, with violent, meticulous details. Fantasies written in her careful handwriting. And at the back, one sentence underlined 3 times. "No one ever really sees me." I realized we'd been so proud of Natalie's achievements, so eager to show her off, that we never stopped to ask what was happening beneath the surface. We taught her how to perform, how to meet expectations, but we never taught her how to be honest, how to confess weakness, how to ask for help. Harold wants to send her to a residential treatment facility, lock her up with therapists who specialize in conduct disorders. He says if we don't act now, someone could get hurt, someone human. But I'm her mother, and I can't accept that my daughter, the little girl who cried over a dead beetle, who begged us to adopt stray cats, who spent Saturdays at the animal shelter, is beyond saving. I don't know if Natalie is a monster, but I know she's suffering. And I know that suffering, left unspoken and unwitnessed, can become something unrecognizable. We're standing at a crossroads. Do we send her away? Do we keep her close and try to rebuild trust? Do we run from this property and pretend the cameras never existed? Or do we finally learn to see our daughter, really see her, before it's too late? This is the story of what we found when we started looking, and what it cost us to finally understand. I remember the exact moment I fell in love with the property. It was a Saturday in late April 2 years ago, and Harold had dragged me out to see just one more place after we'd already looked at 4 other rural lots that month. I was tired, skeptical, and honestly ready to tell him the whole idea of a weekend retreat was a waste of money we didn't really have. But then we turned off Highway 25, drove down a gravel road flanked by dogwood trees in full bloom, and there it was. 12 acres of rolling pasture backed by dense Carolina forest, with the Blue Ridge Mountains rising in the distance like a watercolor painting. "Diane," Harold said, killing the engine, "tell me you don't feel it." And I did. I felt it. The quiet. The space. The sense that if we just had this, This one small corner of the world where we could step away from lesson plans and insurance claims and Natalie's increasingly packed schedule, we might remember who we used to be before life got so loud. We bought it 3 weeks later. The cabin itself was nothing special. A 2-bedroom A-frame built in the 70s with knotty pine paneling and a stone fireplace that smoked if you didn't open the flue just right. But it had a wraparound porch where I could drink my coffee in the mornings. And Harold loved the barn. A faded red structure with good bones, he said, even though half the boards needed replacing. We spent that first summer fixing it up. Natalie helped, or at least she seemed to. She painted the shutters, pulled weeds from the garden beds, even suggested we get chickens. Chickens? Harold laughed. Since when are you interested in farm life? I don't know, Natalie said, grinning. I just think it'd be nice. You know, fresh eggs, taking care of something. That's when we got Jasper. He wasn't our idea, not originally. Harold's coworker, Bill, had a sister who bred quarter horses outside of Marshall, and one of her mares had foaled late in the season. The colt was sweet-tempered but small, not the kind you'd sell for serious money. Bill mentioned it at the office, Harold mentioned it at dinner, and Natalie's eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen since she was little. Please, she said. I'll take care of him, I promise. I should have said no. We didn't know the first thing about horses. But Natalie had been under so much pressure, AP classes, SAT prep, orchestra, volunteering, and I thought maybe this could be her outlet. Something just for her. Something gentle and uncomplicated. We brought Jasper home on a Sunday in September. He was a dark bay with a white star on his forehead. Skittish but curious. Natalie spent hours in the barn that first week, brushing him, talking to him in a soft voice I barely recognized. She even started researching horse care online, printing out articles about nutrition and grooming and hoof health. Look at her, Harold said one evening, watching through the kitchen window as Natalie led Jasper around the pasture on a lead rope. She's a natural. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe we'd given her something good. Asheville is the kind of town where people move to reinvent themselves. Artists, retirees, young families fleeing the chaos of Charlotte or Atlanta. We'd lived there for 8 years, ever since Harold got transferred from the Raleigh office. I taught sophomore English at Reynolds High School, a job I loved more than I admitted. Harold's work was steadier than exciting, adjusting claims, filing reports, attending meetings that could have been emails. Natalie attended St. Catherine's Prep, a small Catholic school with a reputation for rigor and discipline. She thrived there, honor roll every semester, first chair violin in the orchestra, student council treasurer, the kind of kid teachers wrote glowing recommendation letters for without hesitation. She's exceptional, her guidance counselor told us during junior year planning. Colleges are going to fight over her. I smiled and nodded, but something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Exceptional, as if Natalie were a product we'd crafted, polished, and prepared for market. At home, she was different. Not in an obvious way, nothing I could point to and say, there, that's wrong. But she was distant. She spent hours in her room with the door closed, doing homework or practicing violin or scrolling through her phone. When we ate dinner together, she answered questions in polite, complete sentences, but she never volunteered anything real, never complained, never asked for help. She's just focused, Harold said when I brought it up. Teenage girls are like that. Give her space. So I did. The first time I noticed something off was in October, about a month after we got Jasper. I'd driven out to the property on a Friday afternoon to drop off some supplies, birdseed for the feeders, a bag of oats for the horse, a few groceries for the cabin. Natalie was supposed to meet me there after school. She'd gotten her license that summer and loved any excuse to drive the old Subaru we'd given her. I parked near the barn and carried the oats inside. Jasper was in his stall, head low, ears pinned back. When I approached, he startled and backed into the corner. Hey, buddy, I said softly, holding out my hand. What's wrong? He didn't come closer. His eyes were wide, his breathing fast. I checked the stall for snakes or anything that might have spooked him, but there was nothing. Just fresh hay and water. When Natalie arrived 20 minutes later, she was cheerful. Hey, Mom, sorry I'm late. Traffic on Merriman was insane. Natalie, did you come out here this morning? She frowned. No. Why? Jasper's acting strange. Skittish. She set down her backpack and walked to the stall. Jasper's ears flicked forward, but he stayed pressed against the back wall. Weird, Natalie said. Maybe he saw a fox or something. I'll spend some time with him. I watched as she slipped into the stall, murmuring softly, Slowly, Jasper relaxed. By the time I left, she was brushing him, and he was standing calm. I told myself I was overreacting. Horses spook. It's what they do. November came, and with it, the first real cold snap. We spent Thanksgiving at the cabin, just the three of us, which was our tradition. Harold smoked a turkey on the little Weber grill. I made cornbread dressing and green bean casserole. Natalie set the table with candles and the linen napkins we only use twice a year. Before we ate, Harold said grace. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this food, for this family, for the blessings you've given us. Help us to be grateful. Help us to be good. Amen. Amen, Natalie and I echoed. It was the same prayer he'd said for years. Rote, comfortable. But as I looked across the table at Natalie, her head bowed, her hands folded, I wondered if she ever really listened to the words. If any of us did. We ate and talked about nothing important. Natalie mentioned a solo she was preparing for the winter concert. Harold complained about a particularly difficult claim involving water damage and mold. I talked about a student who'd finally turned in a late essay on the Scarlet Letter. Everyone loves Hester, I said, but I always tell them the real tragedy is Dimmesdale. The way guilt eats him alive because he can't confess. That's depressing, Mom, Natalie said, smiling. It's Hawthorne, I said. What do you expect? She laughed, and for a moment, everything felt normal. After dinner, Harold went out to check on Jasper. Natalie and I cleaned up the kitchen, working side by side in the kind of easy silence that used to come naturally when she was younger. I handed her dishes to dry. She stacked them carefully in the cupboard. Mom, she said after a while. Yeah? Do you ever feel like you're not really who people think you are? I paused, a soapy plate in my hands. What do you mean? She shrugged. I don't know. Forget it. Natalie, it's nothing. Just something stupid I was thinking about. She didn't bring it up again, and I didn't push. I told myself it was teenage existentialism, the kind of thing all 16-year-olds wrestle with. But later that night, lying in bed while Harold snored beside me, I couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd said it. Like, you're not really who people think you are. December was brutal. Not weather-wise. Asheville winters are mild compared to where I grew up in upstate New York. But emotionally, Natalie's schedule was relentless. Finals, college prep workshops, Christmas concert rehearsals. The pressure was so constant that I started to wonder if we'd done her a disservice by pushing her so hard. She's fine, Harold said. She's handling it. But I wasn't sure. She'd started losing weight. Not dramatically, but enough that her jeans hung looser, her cheekbones looked sharper. She said she was eating, granola bars between classes, salads at lunch. But I rarely saw her finish a meal at home. Are you feeling okay? I asked one night as she picked at her dinner. I'm fine, Mom. Just not super hungry. You need to eat, Natalie. You're going to make yourself sick. She gave me a tight smile. I know, I will. But she didn't. The weekend before Christmas, we drove out to the cabin to cut a tree from the property. It was something we did every year, tromp through the woods with a handsaw, argue good-naturedly about which cedar or white pine was the one, then haul it back and decorate it while drinking hot chocolate spiked with peppermint schnapps. This year, though, Natalie didn't want to come. I have so much to do, she said. Can I just stay home? It's tradition, Harold said. Come on. A few hours won't kill you. She came, but she was quiet the whole time. She didn't argue about which tree to cut. She didn't help carry it back. She sat in the Subaru with her phone while Harold and I tied the tree to the roof rack. She's exhausted, I said. She's being a teenager, Harold replied. When we got back to the cabin, Natalie asked if she could go check on Jasper. I said yes, grateful she was showing interest in something. Harold and I dragged the tree inside and spent the next hour untangling string lights. Natalie didn't come back for over 2 hours. When she finally walked through the door, her face was flushed, her hair windblown. Everything okay with Jasper? I asked. Yeah, he's good. What took so long? I don't know. Lost track of time. She went to her room and closed the door. The cameras were Harold's idea. He'd heard from Bill that there'd been a string of break-ins around their rural properties north of Asheville. Tool sheds ransacked, ATVs stolen, that sort of thing. Harold was convinced it was only a matter of time before someone targeted our place. We're an easy mark, he said. No neighbors, no security. Anyone could walk in and take whatever they wanted. We don't have anything valuable, I said. We have Jasper. That got my attention. Horse theft wasn't common, but it happened. and the idea of someone hurting Jasper, or worse, taking him, made my chest tighten. "Fine," I said. "Do what you think is best." Harold ordered the cameras online, 4 of them, small, wireless, motion-activated. He installed them on a Sunday in early January while Natalie and I were in town running errands. One pointed at the driveway, one at the cabin's front door, one at the barn entrance, and one, the one that mattered, inside the barn itself, mounted high in the rafters with a clear view of Jasper's stall. Harold didn't tell me about the interior camera. He didn't tell Natalie. He just set it up, linked it to an app on his phone, and forgot about it. Until he didn't. It was a Tuesday night in mid-January when Harold called me into his office. I was grading essays at the kitchen table, 30 responses to the prompt, "What does it mean to live with integrity?" And only half listening when he said my name the first time. Diane. I kept reading. Integrity means doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Diane. His voice cracked. I looked up. He was standing in the doorway to his office, laptop in hand, face white as paper. "What's wrong?" I said, setting down my pen. "You need to see this." I followed him into the office. He set the laptop on the desk, pulled up the security app, and hit play on a saved video. The timestamp read 3:47 p.m. Saturday, 4 days ago. The barn, Jasper in his stall, and Natalie. She was holding a riding crop. I watched as she brought it down on Jasper's hindquarters. Once, twice, 3 times. Hard enough that the horse flinched and tried to turn away. She didn't stop. She hit him again, and then she stepped back and screamed at him. Words I couldn't make out, but the rage in her voice was unmistakable. And then, "God help me," she smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not a smile of relief or release. A smile of satisfaction. Harold's hand was shaking so badly he could barely pause the video. "There's more," he said. He showed me clip after clip. Days of footage. Natalie yelling at Jasper when he didn't obey fast enough. Natalie kicking the stall door. Natalie standing utterly still, staring at the horse with an expression that made my stomach turn. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Our daughter," Harold said, his voice hoarse. "Our daughter is a monster." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to scream at him, to defend her, to find some explanation that made sense. But I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I didn't sleep that night. Harold and I sat in his office until almost 3 a.m, watching footage, rewinding, pausing, searching for some detail we'd missed, some explanation that would make it all make sense. But there was nothing. Just our daughter, alone in that barn, hurting an animal that trusted her. "We have to talk to her," I said finally. "And say what?" Harold's voice was raw. "We've been spying on you, and by the way, you're a psychopath? Don't call her that." "What would you call it, Diane?" I didn't have an answer. We decided to wait until morning. Let her sleep. Let ourselves think. But I spent those hours lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of Natalie's childhood, looking for the crack in the foundation I'd somehow missed. When she was 4, she'd cried for an hour after accidentally stepping on a beetle. When she was 7, she'd begged us to adopt a stray cat she'd found behind the Walgreens. When she was 10, she'd volunteered to help at the animal shelter, spending Saturdays cleaning kennels and walking dogs. How does that child become this? At 6:30, I heard her alarm go off. The shower ran. Footsteps in the hallway. The smell of coffee brewing downstairs. Harold and I got up, dressed, and went down to meet her. She was at the kitchen table eating yogurt and scrolling through her phone, earbuds in. Her hair was damp, pulled into a ponytail. She looked tired, but calm. Normal. "Natalie," Harold said. She pulled out an earbud. "Yeah? We need to talk. Now." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or caution. But she set down her phone and looked at us with that same polite, patient expression she always wore. "Okay," she said. "What's up?" Harold set his laptop on the table, opened it, and turned it toward her. "I installed security cameras at the cabin," he said. "And I need you to explain this." He hit play. I watched Natalie's face as she watched herself. At first, there was nothing, just a blank, unreadable mask. But then as the video continued, her expression shifted. Her jaw tightened. Her breathing quickened. And when Harold paused on the frame where she was smiling, Natalie's hands curled into fists. "You were spying on me?" she said quietly. That's what you're focusing on? Harold's voice rose. You're hurting Jasper, Natalie. You're torturing him. I wasn't. We have it on video. Multiple videos. Don't lie to us. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. Fast, sudden, theatrical tears. I didn't mean to, she said, her voice breaking. I was so stressed and he wouldn't listen and I snapped. I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't mean to hurt him. You were smiling, I said. She looked at me, startled. In the video, I continued, you were smiling. I wasn't. Don't. My voice was sharper than I intended. Don't insult me by pretending I didn't see what I saw. Natalie's tears stopped as suddenly as they'd started. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and stared down at the table. What do you want me to say? She asked. The truth, Harold said. Why did you do it? She was silent for a long time. Then, finally, she looked up at us with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, distant, as if she were looking at strangers. I don't know, she said. Maybe because I could. We called in sick, both of us. Harold emailed his boss. I sent a message to the school saying I had a family emergency. Natalie stayed home too, locked in her room while Harold and I sat in the living room trying to figure out what to do next. We need to take her to a doctor, I said. What kind of doctor? Harold asked. A therapist? A psychiatrist? What do we even say? Our daughter tortures animals for fun? We say she's struggling. We say she needs help. And if they report us? If they decide we're negligent parents? We are negligent parents, Harold. We missed this. Completely. He stood up, pacing. I knew something was off. I knew it. But you kept saying she was fine. That she was just stressed. That we should give her space. Don't put this on me. I'm not putting it on you. I'm putting it on us. We did this. The words hung in the air, heavy and ugly. We didn't do this, I said finally. Something is wrong with her. Something we didn't cause. Then where did it come from? I didn't have an answer. We got an appointment with Dr. Calloway for Thursday afternoon. He was a child psychologist who'd been recommended by our family doctor, a soft-spoken man in his 50s with a calm, reassuring voice and a framed diploma from Duke on his wall. Natalie sat across from him in a leather armchair, hands folded in her lap, looking small and scared. Natalie, Dr. Calloway said gently, your parents are worried about you. They told me you've been having a hard time lately. Can you tell me about that? She nodded. School is really intense. I'm taking 5 AP classes and I have orchestra and volunteering and it's just a lot. That does sound like a lot. Do you feel like you have support? People you can talk to? I guess. My parents are great, but I don't want to bother them. Why do you think you'd be bothering them? She shrugged. They're busy, and I'm supposed to be able to handle things. Dr. Calloway nodded, scribbling notes. Your parents also mentioned that you've been spending time with your horse, Jasper. How's that going? Natalie hesitated, just for a second. Then she smiled. The smile I knew so well, the one that lit up her whole face. Jasper's great. I love him. He's like my best friend. And do you ever feel frustrated with him? Sometimes, like when he won't do what I ask. But that's normal, right? It is. How do you handle that frustration? I take a break, walk away, cool down. Dr. Calloway nodded again. That's very mature of you. Harold and I sat in the waiting room while Natalie finished her session. When she came out, Dr. Calloway called us into his office. Natalie is under a significant amount of pressure, he said. It's not uncommon for high-achieving students to experience stress-related behavioral issues. I'd recommend family therapy, working together to create healthier boundaries and communication patterns. In the meantime, I'll see Natalie individually to help her develop better coping mechanisms. What about the videos? Harold asked. Dr. Calloway frowned. The videos you mentioned are concerning, but context matters. Adolescents sometimes act out in ways that seem alarming but are actually calls for help. Natalie seems genuinely remorseful, and she's cooperative. That's a good sign. A good sign? Harold's jaw tightened. She was smiling. Mr. Mercer, I understand your concern, but I don't see evidence of conduct disorder or antisocial tendencies. What I see is a young woman who's overwhelmed and acting out in a private setting where she feels safe to express negative emotions. That's not ideal, but it's treatable. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But when I looked at Harold, I could see he didn't. Natalie went to 3 more sessions with Dr. Calloway. Each time she came out smiling, saying it was helpful, that she felt better. Harold and I attended 2 family therapy sessions, where we talked about schedules and stress and the importance of emotional attunement. But Harold kept watching the cameras, and Natalie kept going to the barn. "She's doing it again," Harold said one night, showing me his phone. On the screen, Natalie, alone, standing in front of Jasper's stall with her arms crossed. She wasn't hitting him, she wasn't yelling, she was just staring for almost 10 minutes. "Maybe she's just thinking," I said. "Look at her face." I looked, and I saw it. The same cold, empty expression I'd seen in the earlier footage. "Harold, Dr. Calloway said, Dr. Calloway doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a professional. So are we. We're her parents. And I'm telling you, something is very, very wrong." I started looking through Natalie's things. I'm not proud of it. I'd always believed in respecting her privacy, giving her space to grow and make mistakes. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial. I started with her backpack, textbooks, notebooks, a calculator, nothing unusual. Then her desk drawers, pens, sticky notes, a half-finished scarf she'd been knitting for a Christmas gift. Her closet, clothes, shoes, a box of old toys she hadn't touched in years. And then, under her bed, I found it. A cardboard box, shoved far back against the wall, covered with a blanket. Inside, a journal. I should have stopped. I should have put it back and walked away. But I didn't. I opened it. The first few pages were normal. School notes, doodles, a list of colleges she was interested in. But then the tone shifted. Entries about feeling trapped, about hating the way people looked at her, about wanting to scream but knowing she couldn't. And then, the drawings, page after page of sketches, animals, horses, dogs, cats, with exaggerated injuries. People, faceless, anonymous, in positions of pain. And beneath each drawing, notes. Detailed, methodical notes about how the injuries were inflicted, how long the suffering lasted, what the reactions might be. I felt like I was going to be sick. At the back of the journal, on the very last page, one sentence. "No one ever really sees me." I showed Harold the journal that night. He didn't say anything for a long time, just flipped through the pages, his face getting paler with each one. "We have to do something," he said finally. "This isn't stress. This isn't teenage angst. This is... I don't even know what this is." We take her back to Dr. Calloway. We show him this. And if he doesn't listen, if he tells us it's just dark fantasy that lots of kids draw violent things, then we find someone else, a specialist. "Diane." Harold set the journal down and looked at me. "What if she can't be fixed?" The question hung between us, terrible and unthinkable. "She's our daughter," I said. "I know. But what if helping her means accepting that she's dangerous? That we can't keep pretending everything's fine?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. The breaking point came on a Saturday in early February. We'd driven out to the cabin for the weekend, all 3 of us, though the air in the car was thick with tension. Natalie sat in the back seat, headphones on, staring out the window. Harold and I didn't talk. When we arrived, Natalie went straight to the barn. I started unpacking groceries. Harold checked the cameras. Habit now, compulsive. "Diane," he called from the porch. "Come here." I went outside. Harold handed me his phone. On the screen, live footage from the barn camera. Natalie standing in front of Jasper's stall. And in her hand, a knife. Not a big knife, just a pocket knife. The kind Harold kept in the barn for cutting twine and opening feed bags. She wasn't doing anything with it, just holding it, turning it over in her hand. But the look on her face. "Go," Harold said. "Now." I ran. I burst through the barn door so fast I almost tripped. Natalie spun around, startled, the knife still in her hand. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Nothing, I was just..." "Put it down." She looked at the knife, then at me. "Mom, I wasn't..." "Put it down." Slowly, she set the knife on the edge of the stall and stepped back. "I was just cutting the twine on the hay bale," she said. "That's all." I looked past her. There was a hay bale in the corner, still bound, unopened. "You're lying," I said. "I'm not..." "Stop. Just stop." Natalie's face crumpled. "Why don't you believe me? Why don't you trust me?" "Because I've seen what you do when you think no one's watching." Her expression changed, the tears vanished, and in their place, nothing, just that cold, empty stare. "You have no idea what I do when no one's watching," she said quietly. And then she walked past me, out of the barn. I stood there shaking, the knife still on the Jasper watching me, nervous eyes. Harold appeared. "What happened?" "I don't know," I said. "I don't know anymore." That night, after Natalie went to bed, Harold and I sat on the porch and made a decision. "We can't do this alone," I said. "We need real help. Residential treatment, maybe. Somewhere she can be monitored, evaluated properly. And if she refuses? She's 16. She doesn't get to refuse." Harold nodded slowly. "Okay, we'll make some calls. Find a place." "Harold," I looked at him. "What if we're wrong? What if we're overreacting and we send her away and it ruins her? And what if we're right?" he said. "And we don't send her away and someone gets hurt?" I didn't have an answer to that. We sat in silence, the mountains dark against the sky, the February cold biting through our coats. Inside, through the window, I could see Natalie's silhouette moving in her room, and I wondered, really, truly wondered, if I knew my daughter at all. The facility was called Pine Haven. It sat on 40 acres outside of Hendersonville, about 30 miles south of Asheville. A cluster of buildings designed to look less like an institution and more like a small college campus. Brick pathways, oak trees, a duck pond. The kind of place that worked very hard to convince you it wasn't what it was. A lockdown treatment center for adolescents with severe behavioral and psychological disorders. Harold and I toured it on a Tuesday afternoon in late February while Natalie was at school. Our guide was a woman named Ms. Brennan, mid-40s, kind eyes, the sort of person who'd probably gone into this work believing she could save everyone and had long since learned she couldn't. "We focus on intensive individual therapy, group sessions, and family integration," she explained, as we walked through the main building. "Our average stay is 6 to 9 months, though some residents are with us longer. We're equipped to handle a range of diagnoses: conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, early onset personality disorders." "What's your success rate?" Harold asked. Ms. Brennan smiled gently. "That depends on how you define success. Some of our residents leave here and go on to live healthy, productive lives. Others struggle. The key is early intervention and family commitment. The work doesn't end when they leave here." We passed a common room where several teenagers sat on couches, some reading, some talking quietly. They all looked so normal, so much like Natalie. "Do you have experience with—" I hesitated. "With violence toward animals?" Ms. Brennan's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or concern. "Yes," she said. "We've worked with several residents who exhibited that behavior. It's often an early indicator of deeper issues: impulse control, empathy deficits, unresolved trauma. The important thing is addressing it before it escalates." "What if it's already escalated?" Harold asked quietly. "Then we address it now," Ms. Brennan said, "before it escalates further." We told Natalie that night. She was in her room, doing homework at her desk when we knocked. She looked up, and for just a moment I saw something cross her face. Fear, maybe, or resignation, as if she'd been waiting for this. "We need to talk," I said. She closed her laptop and turned to face us. "Okay." Harold and I sat on the edge of her bed. She stayed in her desk chair, hands folded in her lap, that same polite, patient expression fixed on her face. "We've made a decision," Harold said. "We're enrolling you in a residential treatment program. It's called Pine Haven. You'll stay there for a while, probably a few months, and work with therapists who specialize in helping kids who are going through what you're going through." Natalie blinked. "What am I going through?" "You're struggling," I said, "and we don't know how to help you. We need people who do." "I'm fine, Mom. Dr. Calloway said I'm fine." Dr. Calloway was wrong. Her jaw tightened. "So you're sending me away?" "We're getting you help," Harold said. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Her voice was cold now, the mask slipping. "You're locking me up because you think I'm broken." "You hurt Jasper," I said. "You've been hurting him for months. You drew pictures of hurting other animals, other people. That's not normal, Natalie. That's not fine." "I never hurt a person. Not yet." The words came out before I could stop them, and the moment I said them, I regretted it. But I couldn't take them back. Natalie stared at me, and for the first time I saw something raw in her eyes. Not anger, not defiance, just pain. "You think I'm a monster," she said quietly. "I think you're sick," I said. And I think if we don't help you now, you're going to get worse." She looked down at her hands. For a long time, she didn't say anything. Then finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said, "if that's what you want." "It's not about what we want," Harold said. "It's about what you need." "Sure," Natalie said. She turned back to her laptop and opened it. "Can I finish my homework now?" We left her there, and I felt like I was abandoning her, but I didn't know what else to do. Natalie went to Pine Haven on a Sunday in early March. We packed her things, clothes, toiletries, a few books, and drove her down in silence. She sat in the back seat, staring out the window, not crying, not speaking, just absent. When we arrived, Ms. Brennan met us at the entrance. She greeted Natalie warmly, but Natalie barely responded, just nodded and followed her inside. Harold and I weren't allowed to go with her past the intake office. We signed papers, handed over her bags, and then Ms. Brennan walked Natalie through a set of double doors that locked behind them with a soft final click. I broke down in the parking lot. Harold held me while I sobbed, and I hated myself for it. For crying, for feeling like I was the victim, when Natalie was the one being left behind. "We did the right thing," Harold said, but his voice was shaking. I wanted to believe him. The first 2 weeks were the hardest. We weren't allowed to visit. Phone calls were limited to once a week, supervised and brief. Natalie's voice on the other end of the line was flat, emotionless, as if she were reading from a script. "I'm fine. The food is okay. My roommate is quiet. How's Jasper?" I told her Jasper was fine, even though I hadn't been to the cabin since she'd left. Harold had driven out once to feed him and check the property, but I couldn't bring myself to go. Every time I thought about that barn, I saw her face, the cold, empty expression, the smile. Work became my escape. I threw myself into lesson plans, grading, anything to keep my mind occupied. My students were reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and we spent a week discussing Boo Radley, the misunderstood recluse, the monster who turned out to be a hero. "Why does everyone assume he's dangerous?" one student asked. "Because he's different," another student said. "And people are scared of things they don't understand." I thought about Natalie, locked away in Pine Haven, and wondered if I was scared of her, or scared of what I didn't understand about her. We had our first family therapy session at Pine Haven 3 weeks after Natalie arrived. The therapist was a man named Dr. Nguyen, young, probably in his early 30s, with an easy smile and a calm demeanor that reminded me of Mr. Rogers. Natalie sat across from Harold and me in a small, sunlit room. She looked thinner, paler. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore a Pine Haven sweatshirt that was too big for her. "How are you doing, Natalie?" Dr. Nguyen asked. "Fine," she said. "Your parents are here because they love you and want to understand how to support you. Is there anything you'd like to say to them?" Natalie looked at us, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything." "What are you sorry for?" Dr. Nguyen asked gently. "For disappointing you. For making you think I'm—" She trailed off. "For making us think you're what?" I asked. She shook her head. "Nothing." "Natalie," Harold said, leaning forward. "We don't think you're a monster. We think you're in pain, and we want to help." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You put cameras in the barn. You went through my stuff. You sent me here. That's not help. That's control." "We were trying to protect you," I said. "From what?" "From yourself." Natalie laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You don't even know who I am." "Then tell us," I said. "Please. Help us understand." She was quiet for a long time. Then she looked at Dr. Nguyen as if asking for permission. He nodded. "I don't know how to explain it," she said finally. "I've always felt different, like there's something wrong with me. Like everyone else knows how to be a person, and I'm just pretending. And the pretending is exhausting. So sometimes when I'm alone, I just stop. I stop pretending. And the things I do when I stop," she swallowed hard. "I don't know why I do them. I just know it feels like the only time I'm real." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. "Natalie," I said, my voice breaking, "why didn't you tell us?" "Because you wanted me to be perfect," she said. "Honor roll, scholarships, volunteer work, the violin. That's who you wanted, and I gave you that. But it's not me. It was never me." Harold and I sat there, stunned, as the weight of her words settled over us. "We're sorry," I said finally. "We're so sorry." Natalie didn't respond, just looked down at her hands. Dr. Nguyen let the silence sit for a moment, then spoke. This is a good start, he said. A hard start, but a good one. Natalie, you've taken a big step by being honest. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, you've taken a big step by listening. The work now is figuring out how to move forward together. Over the next 3 months, we visited Natalie every other week. The sessions were brutal. Hours of unpacking years of miscommunication, unspoken expectations, and buried resentment. We talked about how we'd prioritized her achievements over her well-being, how we'd taught her to perform instead of teaching her to feel, how we'd missed every sign because we were too proud of the daughter we thought we had to see the daughter we actually had. And Natalie talked too, about the pressure, the loneliness, the anger that had nowhere to go except inward, and then, eventually, outward, onto something weaker and more vulnerable than herself. I didn't want to hurt Jasper, she said during one session, but when I did, I felt something, like I had control over something, like I mattered. You matter, I said. You've always mattered. Not for who I am, she said, only for who I pretended to be. She was right, and hearing her say it broke something in me that I didn't know could break. In May, Dr. Nguyen recommended that Natalie stay at Pine Haven for another 3 months. She's making progress, he said, but she's not ready to come home yet. The risk of regression is high, especially if the home environment hasn't changed. What needs to change? Harold asked. Everything, Dr. Nguyen said. The way you communicate, the way you set expectations, the way you define success. Natalie needs to know that she's loved for who she is, not for what she achieves. And she needs to see that modeled every day. Harold and I left that meeting in silence. On the drive home, he finally spoke. We broke her, he said. No, I said, we didn't. But we didn't save her either. What's the difference? I didn't know. But I knew we had to figure it out. I went to the cabin alone one Saturday in June. I hadn't been there in months, and Harold had been handling all the upkeep, feeding Jasper, mowing the grass, paying the bills. But I needed to see it. I needed to face it. The drive was beautiful. Early summer in the mountains, everything green and alive. I parked near the barn and sat in the car for a long time, trying to gather the courage to go inside. Finally, I got out. Jasper was in his stall, dozing in the afternoon sun. When he saw me, he lifted his head and whinnied softly. I walked over slowly, hand outstretched. He didn't flinch, didn't back away, just stood there, calm and patient as I stroked his neck. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. He leaned into my hand and I started to cry. Not for me, not for Harold, for Natalie, for the little girl who'd wanted to help at the animal shelter, who'd cried over a dead beetle, who'd begged us for a stray cat, for the girl we'd lost somewhere along the way. I stayed in the barn for over an hour, brushing Jasper, talking to him, letting the tears come. And when I finally left, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. Acceptance, maybe, or the beginning of it. Natalie came home in late August, just before the start of her senior year. We picked her up on a Sunday afternoon. She looked different, healthier, stronger, but also more guarded. She hugged us both, but it was tentative, as if she weren't sure how. The drive home was quiet. Natalie stared out the window, and I wondered what she was thinking. When we pulled into the driveway, she turned to us. "Can we go to the cabin?" she asked. "I want to see Jasper." Harold and I exchanged a glance. Then he nodded. "Yeah," he said, "we can do that." We drove out the next weekend, all three of us, for the first time in months. Natalie was quiet on the drive, but when we arrived, she got out of the car and walked straight to the barn. Harold and I followed, keeping our distance. She stood in front of Jasper's stall for a long time, just looking at him. He looked back, ears forward, curious. "Hey, buddy," she said softly. Jasper took a tentative step forward, then another. And then he pressed his nose against the stall door, right where Natalie's hand rested. She started to cry. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Harold put his arm around my shoulders, and we watched as our daughter sobbed, her hand on the horse's muzzle, her body shaking with the weight of everything she'd carried for so long. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. Natalie didn't go back to St. Catherine's Prep. We enrolled her in the public high school instead, where the pressure was lower and the expectations more flexible. She dropped orchestra, stopped volunteering, focused on therapy, twice a week with a trauma specialist Dr. Nguyen had recommended. She also started working with Jasper again, under supervision. A local trainer named Maria came out to the cabin once a week to teach Natalie proper groundwork techniques, and I watched as my daughter slowly, painstakingly, rebuilt trust with the animal she'd hurt. It was hard. There were setbacks. Days when Natalie couldn't get out of bed. Days when she snapped at us over nothing. Days when I saw that cold, empty look flicker across her face and wondered if we were fooling ourselves. But there were good days, too. Days when she laughed at dinner. Days when she asked for help with homework without shame. Days when she came downstairs in the morning and said, "I had a nightmare. Can we talk?" We started going to Mass together again, not every week, but often enough. We sat in the back pew, and I listened to the gospel readings with new ears. Stories about prodigal sons and lost sheep and sinners welcomed home. Stories about mercy, about second chances, about the long, hard road of redemption. I'd spent so much of my life focused on doing things right, being a good teacher, a good wife, a good mother, but I'd never really understood grace. The kind of grace that says, you failed, you fell, and you're still loved. It's been a year now since Natalie came home. She's 18. She graduated in May, not with honors, not with scholarships, but she graduated. She's taking a gap year, working part-time at a bookstore in Asheville and continuing therapy. She talks about maybe going to community college next fall, studying something she actually cares about instead of something that looks good on an application. She still struggles. We all do. But she's learning to ask for help, to admit when she's overwhelmed, to recognize the signs when the darkness starts creeping back in. And Harold and I, we're learning too. Learning to listen more than we speak. Learning to love her as she is, not as we want her to be. Learning that being a parent isn't about creating a perfect child. It's about walking alongside a broken one and refusing to let go. Last weekend, the three of us went to the cabin. Natalie spent the afternoon with Jasper, grooming him, walking him around the pasture. Harold and I sat on the porch watching. "You think she's going to be okay?" Harold asked. I thought about it. About everything we'd been through. Everything we'd lost. Everything we'd learned. "I don't know," I said. "But I think she's trying. And I think that's enough." Harold reached over and took my hand. We sat there in silence, watching our daughter move through the tall grass with the horse beside her, the mountains rising in the distance, the late summer sun turning everything gold. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that might have been peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because we were still here, still together, still trying. And maybe that was all Grace ever asked for. The end. My husband installed a camera at our cabin and didn't tell anyone. When he watched the footage, he went pale and said, "Our daughter is a monster. We need to leave."